Heading into tonight, Syracuse men's basketball was 4-0 at home, and those two losses that they had in Brooklyn at the Barclays Center, not great for the resume of Syracuse, but tonight was a whole new challenge on the road in Rocky Top at number 3 Tennessee. And let's just say the Orange fell short. 96-70, Syracuse falls in what was a pretty ugly game, especially in the second half. We're going to tell you what's fixable for Syracuse, what we think is a big concern going forward, and a whole lot more on Orange Press Pass, and it starts right now. Welcome on into our CitrusTV studio for this edition of Orange Press Pass. I'm Ryan Bridges alongside AJ Myers and Sean Dempsey, breaking down Syracuse men's basketball's 96-70 loss to number 3 Tennessee. The Orange fall apart in the second half, struggle from the free throw line early in the game. A lot to unpack here. AJ, give me your first thoughts.
Ryan, my first initial thoughts are I'm not that surprised. Sean, I saw this coming. This team could barely beat the likes of Lemoyne, Colgate, Cornell against the third best team in the country. Ultimately, at the end of the day, Syracuse stood no chance. They hung around. I was really impressed with this Orange team and how they played in the first half. Though there was a lot of toughness, a lot of grit they showed. The second half, and Adrian Autry alluded to this in his post-game practice conference, that all disappeared. A real lack of effort and a lack of pride, I think, in that second half from the Syracuse team. They looked awful against Tennessee.
Yeah, AJ, my first thought is that Syracuse just can't compete with some of the top teams in the nation after this game. Syracuse just doesn't have enough people on offense to compete against a team like Tennessee and even some tough teams in the ACC like Duke or UNC. And they also just don't have players defensively. It's just a talent problem for Syracuse men's basketball. Also, it's just going to be a long season for Syracuse. Obviously, J.J. Starling did not play in this game. That is going to be, a big cause for concern going forward. So it's going to be a tough battle, and it was against Tennessee.
A tough battle against Tennessee, and we got to see how some of these things happen. We've alluded to how Syracuse got blown out so bad, but let's look at some of the plays that happened and why they got blown out so bad. Syracuse doesn't start off well, loses that opening tip, but Syracuse, early on at least, has tried to establish some inside presence. Eddie Lampkin gets that bucket to go right there. And Syracuse also turned the ball over. Tennessee out in transition. How about that finish from Chaz Lanier? Game high 26 points. And, AJ, Elijah Moore certainly heated up in this game.
Elijah Moore was excellent. He had a career high 24 points today. And what I like from him most is that he can create his own shot while dribbling the ball, takes the screen, wide open three, knocks it down. That's something a lot of these SU players cannot do.
Syracuse, though, able to stay in this first half because Tennessee was not hitting shots from deep. This from Zakai Ziegler is one of 2 threes that they had in that first half, a 4-point play, and then Ziegler throws it up. Felix Okapara throws it down. Tennessee goes into the break with a 10-point lead, but Syracuse able to get a little 2 right here from Jake Juan Carlos, who has struggled on offense, especially in non-conference play so far this season. But Zakai Ziegler, once again, 8 assists on the night. He throws the lob once again. We didn't see a whole lot of Jair Davis in this game. We haven't seen a whole lot of him after 2 really excellent performances against Lemoyne and Colgate, and the inside presence, Sean, just kept working for the Volunteers, and eventually they hit the threes.
That's right, Ryan. Syracuse struggled to defend against Tennessee all game long down low.
Down low, and then eventually the threes opened up. They hit 8 of their first 12 attempts from downtown in the second half. Here's the cherry on top from Zakai Ziegler, and the Orange fall by their largest margin of the season. We see Elijah Moore, a great performance on offense, but the rest of the Syracuse team just could not heat up at the right times.
No, and Elijah Moore really stands out. And you can put Chris Bell's 12 points up there, but he, again, still struggled shooting the ball. He did not hit a single three-pointer. Sean, that's something you need your supposed three-point shooter to do.
A very, very streaky game from Chris Bell, and I feel like we've kind of seen that from him all season long. Obviously, the highlight, like we mentioned, is Elijah Moore, 24 points, a career high for him. Really, really impressive. Honestly, wish that we saw more of him against Tennessee tonight.
Syracuse certainly struggled at all points in this game, and someone who saw all the action in Rocky Top was our reporter for the game for our show Orange Press Pass, Shrikar Rajendran. And Shrikar, it was certainly a problem all game for Syracuse, especially in the rebounding department. How does Adrian Autry plan to close this gap on the boards?
Well, Ryan, I actually don't think the jury is fully out yet, because Coach Autry didn't really say anything specific towards the rebounding, but in my eyes, you brought Eddie Lampkin and Donnie Freeman in to be anchors down low. Anchors. And what that means is being good on both ends of the floor. And that is something that Autry emphasized throughout the press conference. You can't be good on one end of the floor and have defensive lapses and expect it to make up the difference. That's just not how basketball works. That's not how Syracuse basketball works. That's not the standards they play at. So the one big theme was, being good on both ends, and that means being physical. And Eddie Lampkin getting out-rebounded, and Donnie Freeman getting out-rebounded for that matter, everyone getting out-rebounded is a problem, a major problem. And I think Coach Autry is definitely aware of that. So we're not tiptoeing around the conversation here, but I do think that Eddie Lampkin and Donnie Freeman, whatever big man Syracuse decides to throw out there, there's potential to work within this offense, but we're not seeing the full capabilities of it quite just yet.
Shrikar, AJ here. We talked about it. Elijah Moore, career high 24 points today. And something I thought maybe to start that second half is we'd see him on the floor in the start, right off the jump. We didn't see that. Did Adrian Autry hint at why maybe we didn't see Elijah Moore right from the start in the second half?
So I actually tried to ask Coach Autry if, what the process was behind that decision to not start Elijah Moore in the second half. He didn't give the answer, but he did mention what I just mentioned before. The box score is great. What we see from Elijah Moore is great. It was a really efficient day. You shoot 8 for 12, 5 for 6 in the first half. That's great offensive production. But again, it's what you do on both ends of the floor. And there were some defensive lapses from Elijah Moore that Coach Autry, sought out. And he says the team as a whole could not carry what was, a great offensive performance from Elijah Moore. So overall, what the theme was keeping it team-focused. This is not Syracuse's brand of basketball, even though there were some good individual performances, albeit on one side of the floor from Elijah Moore. The entire totality of the game was ugly, and there's no way to escape that. So even the best performances may get a little bit overshadowed. But AJ, I do think that Elijah Moore had a great performance, and there's a lot of potential there moving forward, and hopefully some momentum as well.
Hey, Shrikar, aside from Elijah Moore, who do you think made the biggest impact on the floor for Syracuse tonight?
Well, this is something that Coach Autry made pretty evident. It's Jaquan Carlos. He had 37 minutes in this game, more than any other Syracuse player, and it's because Coach Autry trusts him to be the main ball handler, the primary facilitator, right? That is what Jaquan Carlos was brought into this program to do. And to his credit, he shoots 3 for 8. He doesn't have the best, stat line. But looking beyond the game, this is a guy that Coach Autry trusts. This is a guy that he expects to have a big impact. We talked about the Starling injury and who needs to step up after that. Maybe Jaquan Carlos is one of those guys, because what the vibe is from Coach Autry is he really puts his faith in him to facilitate this offense, keep things moving, and hope that it leads to production, down the line and into games like this one. Obviously, we didn't see it too much today, but being the primary source of ball handling and facilitating is something that Coach Autry emphasized, and for that, I do think that the impact that Carlos brought to this game was massive and evident.
Syracuse needs guys that they can trust on both ends of the floor. We've got someone down in Tennessee that we sure do trust to get us the answers to all of our questions. Shrikar Rajendran, thank you so much for joining us on Orange Press Pass. After the break, we're going to talk a little bit more about what went wrong for Syracuse between the two halves and what could go right maybe in the backcourt. What should Syracuse start out with, especially with the loss of J.J. Starling? That and more on Orange Press Pass. Welcome back to Orange Press Pass, live from our CitrusTV studios. I'm Ryan Bridges, alongside AJ Myers and Sean Dempsey. Syracuse falls by 26 points on the road at number 3 Tennessee, and it was really a tale of two halves in this one. Sometimes it's a cliche, it definitely applies to this game, guys. Syracuse went into the break, only down 10, and then they come out in that second half and they really struggle offensively. AJ, what came to mind when you were watching that game?
When I was watching this game, Ryan, I look at three main things, and this is really throughout the entire game. Offensive rebounding, three-point shooting, and points off of those rebounds. In that first half, Tennessee had 12 offensive rebounds. They got 6 points. And then the three-point shooting. In that first half, Tennessee shot the ball from 3, 2 of 15, which is atrocious. That's why Syracuse was able to stay in this game. Sean, guess what? In the second half, Tennessee made 8 threes on 14 attempts. That was really the difference, and they continue to get those offensive boards and those second chance points. That was really the story of the game, and also to start that second half, Syracuse only had 4 points in the first 5 minutes of the game. It was just a slow, lethargic start to the second half for Syracuse.
It seriously was a tale of two halves in this one. Syracuse did a very bad job defending the three-point line, and it showed in the second half. Tennessee was shooting below 20% from beyond the arc in the first half, and finished shooting about 35% from three-point land. Also, head coach Adrian Autry mentioned in the post-game press conference that free throws were a really big problem for Syracuse in the first half. In the second half, they didn't send out Elijah Moore right away, like we mentioned before. Also, the rebounding margin as well was a big problem for Syracuse in this one.
Not much that Elijah Moore can do when he's sitting on the bench to start that second half. The Orange started out 1 for 6 from the field in those first couple minutes of that second frame. But let's talk a little bit about Elijah Moore and what he did when he was on the floor. Sean, what impresses you so much about his game?
Elijah Moore, what a player, right?
Yes.
Seriously, there's not much not to like about Elijah Moore, but it's really just because he's a shot creator, right? He can create his own shot, and not a lot of guys on the Syracuse team can really do that, and that's what's so important about him. He shot 7 from 11 from the field today, and also shot 2 from 5 from three-point land, but like I mentioned, he moves very well off the ball, and that's really important. He's able to get open, and he sort of proved in this game, which I think is really important, guys, is that he might be that go-to guy when J.J. Starling is out, and he might be, the offensive threat that Syracuse really needs.
And really, the entire season, Sean, we have seen every time Elijah Moore has checked into the game, he has made an instant impact with making quick shots, really being that energizer off the bench. Well, Coach Autry, it's time to get him off the bench at the start of games. I don't care that he can't play defense or he's a liability on the defensive end. I'll explain more about that in a second. When you get 12 points on 5 of 6 shooting in the first half, I don't understand how you do not start this guy in the second half where you're playing the third best team in the country relatively close. It wasn't like they were getting smoked in the first half. It was a 10-point game. It makes no sense to me, Ryan, why Elijah Moore did not start in the second half.
Yeah, and the Orange definitely needs some more scoring going forward, especially with the loss of J.J. Starling. So there's mainly 3 guys that they're playing around with in that backcourt. For the most part, it's Lucas Taylor, who also got into the starting lineup in place of Starling today. Jaquan Carlos has been there, and then Elijah Moore. When you think about those 3 guys, I know you want Elijah Moore in the starting lineup, but who goes next to him?
Who goes next to him in J.J. Starling's absence? It's not perfect, but guess what? This Syracuse team right now isn't perfect. I'm going to start Lucas Taylor. I'm going to give Adrian Autry some credit, because I know I just kind of criticized him pretty bad there. Lucas Taylor was a smart play. Starting him in the game, I know he doesn't give you a lot on offense. He only had 1 point on 1 shot attempt. He just made a free throw. Not a guy for scoring, but he is a really good defensive option. So guess what? You're going to have a really good scorer in Elijah Moore. You're going to have a bad scorer in Lucas Taylor, but then you're going to flip it on the defensive side. You'll have a good defender and a not so great player on the defensive end. So you can't get both, but you can get something of a little bit of both in Lucas Taylor and Elijah Moore.
Yeah, I really can't criticize you there, AJ. I have to say I'm definitely putting Elijah Moore in my starting lineup, and then Jaquan Carlos as well. Elijah Moore, like I mentioned before, he can create his own shot. But Carlos is really just the facilitator of this offense, which I think is really important for Syracuse. He can find the open man. He's a pass-first type of guy, where you see that Elijah Moore is kind of a score-first type of guy when it comes to the offense in itself. And even though Carlos is only averaging 3 assists per game, he is a very good passer and has a lot of great vision on the court.
Look, Jaquan Carlos had a decent game today. However, though, I just don't see enough of him offensively, and I think he's also a defensive.
Played basically the entire game.
Yeah, and that was crazy. How he played 37 minutes is beyond me. But I still worry about him on the defensive end. He just has not impressed me so far this season.
Someone on the other side of things that really did impress for the Volunteers, the reason why they get this big win against Syracuse, was Zakai Ziegler. He shoots 5 of 11 from the field. He gets 14 points, 8 assists, and how about 4 steals to go along with it? A guy that's been active on both ends and has really taken this Tennessee team to the next level. Came off the bench last season and still did a lot of work against Syracuse. He was hitting tough shots all day and then blowing up drives in the lane, constantly getting steals and being active on both ends of the floor. He is our Orange Press Pass player of the game. But we're going to change topics here real quick. Go back to the Syracuse side of things when we return here on Orange Press Pass. We're going to go into the front court just a little bit more and talk about what Syracuse can do better down low, as they also struggled on that end of the floor. We'll be back in just a little bit. Rolling along here on Orange Press Pass, breaking down Syracuse's 26-point loss on the road against number 3 Tennessee. I'm Ryan Bridges. AJ Myers, Sean Dempsey still with me. And we're going to look a little bit past this Tennessee game. The Orange have played all different types of levels of opponents, guys. Some opponents that are more even with them, some opponents where they'd be favored, and then some opponents where they'll be the underdog like today. Now that we've seen about 7 games with this Syracuse team, we're going to do a little bit of crystal ball, thinking forward and seeing what kind of season these guys might be having coming up. One of the guys is Chris Bell. Came into the day shooting below 30% from downtown, and he's normally known, AJ, as a three-point specialist. What do you see for Bell for the rest of the season?
I see Chris Bell hopefully finding his shooting confidence, Sean. This guy is supposed to be Syracuse's reliable three-point shooter. He didn't make a single three today. He has to find the confidence. Chris Bell is a good player. He could be a great player. He showed it at the end of last season. He just needs to get his confidence. Once he finds his confidence, Chris Bell is an entirely different player than what we are seeing today. Even on the defensive end, you just saw that play right there. Kind of lackluster, not getting back in transition. He looks like a player that is a shell of himself, and he's a veteran guy. He needs to find it soon because he hasn't been performing up to his standard.
Yeah, AJ, it's going to be really interesting to see how Bell does down the stretch of the season, because my main thing is how much longer is Adrian Autry going to give Bell serious minutes? He's kind of struggled so far from three-point land this season, like you mentioned, sort of a shell of himself. He's a streaky shooter. We know that. He can be really good at times. He also can not be really good at times. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can really, come into his own down the stretch of the season against some of these tougher opponents. His role as a three-point shooter, but he really needs to go out there and show us that.
Sean, here's my biggest thing is I don't know if Adrian Autry has the guts almost to put Chris Bell on the bench, and I don't know if he's going to do that this early in the season or even in the mid part of the season.
Yeah. The good thing is, though, is that Chris Bell is a guy that has performed before for the Orange, and specifically for Adrian Autry. He's one of the few returners on this Syracuse team. A newcomer and a guy that attracted a lot of headlines was Donnie Freeman. Has a great game against Cornell. He posts that double-double, only 10 points today, and there's some growing pains when you have a freshman like that, but someone who's really highly touted, Sean, you expect a little bit more early on.
Donnie Freeman is just a very, very interesting player because he came into Syracuse to be this immediate impact guy, and he really just hasn't been so far this season, but he has a lot of potential. He's very raw, and he can, do things down low, but what we've kind of seen this season is that, he's recruited to be an immediate impact player, but he isn't really good enough yet to kind of take over a game, especially against some of these tougher opponents like we saw today against Tennessee. Freeman is good at rebounding. We know that, obviously. He's averaging about 9 per game, but can he sort of develop into that this year is going to be really, really interesting because I think he has the potential to do it. It's just whether he can go out there and do it, especially against some of the ACC opponents.
Sean, I know you're a big stock guy. The way I'm putting Donnie Freeman's freshman year so far is one of those stocks that's up and then it goes down. He was up against Cornell. He had an excellent game, his best game of his collegiate career. Tonight, in the big moment, he just didn't have that confidence. If he could find that confidence, he is a so much better player. He can be Syracuse's best player. I keep saying this. The guy looks like Kevin Durant out there. He has that built. He can really be a dynamic scorer for this team. He can be this team's leading scorer, I think, Ryan, if he can just find that confidence.
A guy who's been a leading scorer on a couple of occasions for Syracuse already so far this season, and also a great passer down low is Eddie Lampkin. They get him from Colorado, but he does not have a good game today, AJ. 0 assists, only took 1 shot in the second half. What happened for the big man?
I have no idea. I really cannot figure out where this guy went, especially in the second half. In that first half, there were instances where I liked what he was doing. He was getting down low. He was trying to feed the ball out to the corners for players like Chris Bell, who unfortunately could not knock those shots down. But in the second half, I have no idea what happened to Eddie Lampkin. And unfortunately, this has been the problem. He's been involved in games, but only for certain stretches. He needs to have a full, complete game. I need him to fill up the box score a lot more. Eddie Lampkin really, for me, Sean, hasn't delivered yet. I know he's been dealing with an injury, but he really needs to raise his game because I said Chris Bell's a veteran. Well, this guy's a senior. He's only got 1 year here at SU. He needs to start delivering for this team because he's not doing enough for me.
Lampkin, coming in from Colorado, has March Madness experience, something that this team really just doesn't have much of, to be quite frank. Lampkin really needs to be a leader on this team, right? I mean, when you have a game like this against Tennessee where you get blown out, someone really needs to step up and say, hey guys, we're going to be okay. And Lampkin really needs to be that guy. And like you mentioned, you need a full stretch of play from Lampkin. Can he carry this team to be competitive against tougher ACC teams? We see him down the stretch of the season. He's a great passer, but like you mentioned, Ryan, he just didn't do that today. And that's one of his really underrated skills that a lot of bigs in the ACC can score and they can rebound. But it's that passing ability that's really differentiates him.
One thing I thought Eddie Lampkin would be for this team is getting him the ball and he'd go to work in the paint. He'd score.
He's such a big presence.
It'd be 3 or 4 possessions in a row. It'd be getting the ball down low to Eddie Lampkin and he'd score. Ryan, we just simply have not seen that yet this year.
But when we talk about the passing ability, you're facing a bigger team today. When he catches that ball in that low post against Lemoyne or Colgate, you can kind of survey the field a little bit, see where that guy is, have those eyes in the back of your head and kind of throw that pass one-handed. You can't do that when you got all those trees down low. So what do you think Eddie Lampkin can do better with distributing the basketball, especially against these tougher teams? Is it something he's just going to have to go away from, or do you think he can keep doing it?
I think he can keep doing it, but the problem is, Sean, is that the players aren't hitting the shots. I think if Chris Bell is hitting a bunch of threes, I think Eddie Lampkin will have a lot more confidence in getting the ball to the corner.
Yeah, I think the thing with Eddie Lampkin is, he flashed the free throw line. You have to find the open guy, but to be quite frank, they weren't making him today, and that at the end of the day is the big problem.
All right, well, we've talked a lot about Syracuse and Tennessee for sure, but that was part of the ACC-SEC Challenge. A lot of other games going on around the nation as well. We're going to give you an update on that and then give you our final thoughts wrapping this one up between Syracuse and Tennessee.
Did you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Did you hear about the pony with a sore throat? He was a little horse.
Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why couldn't the Wait.
Why was the basketball court all wet?
Why?
Because the players kept dribbling all over it. Where'd the cats go on vacation?
New York.
Welcome back into Orange Press Pass. Syracuse men's basketball falls to Tennessee. We've talked about it a lot alongside AJ Myers and Sean Dempsey. But guys, let's look elsewhere around the country. Lots of college basketball heating up. The ACC-SEC Challenge has gone in favor of the Southeastern Conference 9-0. They've already claimed the challenge, and the night is not even over with some of these games. Guys,
Was it really a challenge?
I guess it was really not a challenge. We thought we had it bad with Syracuse here, but it's kind of been a theme all across the country. When you see some of these scores, what do you think?
I mean, I'm just thinking in terms of the conference. 9-0 for the SEC is bizarre, and I think that really shows a problem with college basketball, maybe a problem with the ACC. If there's no really strong competitive teams in the ACC, that's a problem for Syracuse because that means there's not going to be too many quad one opportunities when they get in the conference play. And on this slate, Sean, a game I'm looking at is North Carolina and Alabama. If UNC can pull off an upset there, that would be massive for the Atlantic Coast Conference.
That would be great for the conference because, like you mentioned, the ACC is sort of top heavy, but not as top heavy as it usually is in previous seasons with Duke and North Carolina. There aren't a lot of other players in the ACC. I mean, Georgia Tech is okay. Wake Forest, was projected to finish I think 4th in the ACC. So not all that. A game that is really, really interesting that maybe isn't in the ACC is UConn versus Baylor. I mean, UConn just lost 3 games in the Maui Invitational. That is going to be a very big test for not only UConn but Baylor as well to see kind of where they are standing so far this season.
But guys, the ACC might be able to get a win. Clemson right now with 40 seconds left, up 5 against number 4 Kentucky. So
that'd be huge.
Maybe the Atlantic Coast Conference can pull off one game out of all of these. We've got more Orange Press Pass though tomorrow, and we're going to the women's side of things. Syracuse women's basketball, their own ACC-SEC Challenge. They're going down to Texas A&M. This is a team that bounced back against Yale, but has already struggled so far this season, Sean.
Yeah, not a strong start so far to the season for Syracuse women's basketball. This is definitely going to be a tougher test for them against Texas A&M, a team that has been doing somewhat well so far this season. It's going to be interesting to see how that one shapes up.
Yeah, Syracuse women's basketball, you can see they're at that 4-4 record. It's been a fluky start for them. They've had some really strong games. They've had some games where they have not performed well at all. Head coach Felicia Leggett-Jack has really gotten on her team early in the season.
Yep.
And she's been saying this team has been disrespecting defense and things of a variety of like that. The biggest thing for this team is can they establish that starting 5? It's been a lot of changes in that lineup, Ryan. If FLJ can establish what her best 5 is, that'll really help against a good Aggies team.
Adrian Autry still is trying to establish what is his best 5, especially with the loss of J.J. Starling. A left hand injury yesterday at practice. He's out indefinitely. That's according to a couple people around Syracuse men's basketball. It was announced just before the game, a couple of hours before. So with that in mind, with everything that we've talked about tonight, give me your final thought.
My final thought is, when are these problems for Syracuse men's basketball going to get fixed? After every time we hear Adrian Autry at the press conference, it's, well, my team isn't playing good enough defense. We're not hustling. They're not doing the simple things. He's said that 5 or 6 times now. Sean, these things have got to get fixed. Coach Autry, I'm sure you're coaching this team, but these players got to display that they are making the adjustments, making the changes, because we're seeing the same mistakes time and time again, and it's costing the team. That's why they got blown out by Tennessee today.
My final thought, and I know we mentioned J.J. Starling earlier, is that someone needs to step up as long as J.J. Starling is out. And who is it going to be? Is it going to be Eddie Lampkin? Is it going to be Donnie Freeman? Is it going to be Elijah Moore? I mean, after today, it might be Elijah Moore, so it's going to be interesting to see. And someone is going to need to step up.
And these non-conference games are what put Syracuse in a hole last season because they lost against Tennessee, they lost against Gonzaga, and then they had to do so much in ACC play. And once you suffer that one quad 3 loss, it kind of wipes you out of contention for that NCAA tournament. That's where Syracuse is trying to go, but we're out of time here on Orange Press Pass. For Ryan Bridges, AJ Myers, Sean Dempsey, and all of our producers behind the scenes, we say goodnight from Syracuse.